This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest.
Hey, this is Cristian Roldan.
And Jordan Morris from the Seattle Sounders Football Club.
And you're listening to...
This is Nos Arietes.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
Save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Ruidiaz through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nico Ladero leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is good.
Seattle Sounders, the greatest MLS team in history.
They've scored! They've scored! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
Is that what you young people call twerking?
And Paul McKay says, cheat!
We want to win. Let's see how the Sunday, bro.
Welcome back to another edition of Nos Arietes, sponsored by Full Pull Wines, Watson's Counter, and our Substack subscribers. This is episode 405, and we're recording on Tuesday, June 13th, 2023. I'm your host, Jeremiah O'Shan. Joining me as usual is Aaron Campo and our engineer, Lickett. Well, give the Sounders this. At least they made it entertaining. The Sounders finally broke out of their scoring doldrums by putting 3 past Charlotte FC, including a brace from Raul Ruidiaz and another from Cristian Roldan in both of their first starts in about 2 months. The only problem? The Sounders also gave up 3 goals, albeit all pretty well taken. Each of Charlotte's goals erased the Sounders' lead, meaning the Sounders blew more leads in this game than they had in their previous 17 combined. It had only happened once. Given all that, does this feel like progress or just more frustration, Aaron?
I think it feels a little bit like both, and I know that's a cop out, but that's really how I felt. I mean,
It did, yeah.
So I watched the game today because I was at a barbecue this weekend with some old friends, and I just did not feel like not spoiling myself. You know, I'm sure you've been there where it's just like I just don't want to not look at my phone for 12 hours, and so I knew what happened. I knew what happened in real time, which made it maybe even worse. And I was prepared to be really annoyed, and I was, but I think I was less annoyed than I expected to be. I thought the Sounders looked very good in the attack. After the first goal, I was pretty disappointed with how much the state of the game changed. The Sounders just looked like they kind of fell asleep, and Charlotte was pretty dominant for an extended period of time after that goal before they got their own. But, really for the rest of the game, I the goals were frustrating, sure. I mean, they were definitely frustrating, and there are things that I did not like from the defense. I thought that they were weirdly aggressive at bad times and extremely timid at equally bad times. I thought, there were individual plays where guys just got made to look pretty foolish, but it's not like they were a shambles like they were against Portland, back in the early days or at other times this year. They just had some lapses, and Charlotte did, to their credit, make some pretty big good plays. But I thought in the attack, and that's really the phase of the game that I'm a lot more concerned about, the Sounders looked as good as they have in months. And Raul being back to, I think he looked as good in this game as he looked since the spring of last year.
Yeah, I agree. Since Champions League, probably.
Yeah, I think it was clear to see how much of a difference Cristian made, Cristian being back. I think one of the things that was a topic of discussion generally, and I think is a worthwhile topic of discussion for us probably, is that Nico Ladero did not play this game. Albert Rusnak played in Nico Ladero's 10 spot, and I thought looked great. And I thought the Sounders attack looked great. And I thought that a lot of the sort of halting, timid, not especially urgent attacking play that we've seen that's kind of been a hallmark of this downward trend was not in evidence at all. I don't think personally that is because Nico wasn't playing, but I think it could potentially be partially because the version of Nico that has been here the last month or so wasn't playing.
Yeah, that's we may as well start there. That was one of the big changes to the lineup. Nico Lido pulled up with an adductor strain, I guess on Thursday, and that had sort of a cascading effect in terms of its impact on the starting lineup. Rusnak obviously moved up to the 10, and then Obed Vargas moved into the double pivot, and there's some mixed reviews, I think, about Vargas in this one, and then we'll talk about Rusnak too. But I've kind of talked myself now into talk about Vargas. He definitely makes a mistake, I think, on the second goal. Like, he overcommits, he goes to ground. I don't think he really needs to go to ground there. He also had a chance to sort of break up that was part of a counterattack that he probably could have made a play on to help break up. Albert Rusnak also had a chance to almost actually made a really good play to break up that. But to, like you said, like Ashley Westwood, that's a great strike. Whether or not he creates the space for himself, that's a good strike. You tip your hat, right? You hit from 22 yards. That's kind of happens. And I think all three of the goals that Charlotte scored were ultimately well taken. Now there were critical errors in all of them. The first one, the Sounders they have 4 marking 2 in the box and somehow allow Jalen Lindsey to be absolutely wide open at the far post. Now, I think there's a fair debate as to whether or not Karol Swiderski actually kept that ball in, but somehow we don't have a good angle of that, despite MLS supposedly having like 15 cameras at games. They apparently don't have one down the end, the byline there. That doesn't make a lot of sense, right? But anyway, that we didn't get a camera angle of that one, and it was a great play, assuming it was actually in. And then the last goal, again, the Sounders probably gave the crosser too much space, but it was a header that the guy did a good job with. And I don't know, I got off topic, but Obed Vargas, I thought he was solid. He had a couple bad turnovers. Neither one of them ended up costing the Sounders anything. And he had the play on the goal. But overall, I thought he was okay. What did you make of Vargas's performance?
I think okay is about right. I think that I was a little more frustrated with the play that led to Westwood having the space to score. You're right, that is a great strike. And in general, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but one of the things that I thought was very strange in this game was Charlotte had a ton of good looks from right outside the box.
Yeah,
and normally you're okay with guys taking shots from there. I mean, that's not a super high percentage area, but there's usually a little bit more of a contest there. There's a little bit more people in the way or whatever it is. And that was a little weird. I thought,
yeah, Ben Bender also hit one off the post.
Yep. That was the other one that stood out. But I think even on the first goal, the initial shot that came in was a guy in like a lot of space just at the top of the box, and it was blocked. But if you've got shots being blocked in that area, weird stuff can happen. But I digress. I thought that play looked pretty bad, but is not usually going to be the difference between a goal and not. I think it's easy to, when that gets scored, it's easy to say, oh, if he doesn't go to ground there, if he doesn't bite on the fake, that's not a goal. Probably true, but 8 out of 10 times it's probably not going to be a goal either. So
right.
One of those things. And I mean, he's a kid, and I think that the mistakes that we saw him make in this game are the kind of mistakes that maybe you would expect and can live with from a player at his level of experience. But I think you could see a lot of the good things that he brings and a lot of the potential that he has. I didn't think he was, by any stretch, the difference between winning this game and not winning this game. I think that there just usually has to be a scapegoat, and he felt like I don't know, he felt like the right one or the most obvious one in this game, because nothing stood out to me as being like, oh, he's horrible. He was horrible in this game. He looked like he didn't belong. I didn't feel that way at all. I thought he was just okay.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. There was, I think there's room for second guessing to start him over Josh Atencio, who had been with the Sounders. He wasn't away at the U20 World Cup, and he had presumably been training all week. But I don't know. You'd have a hard time convincing me that the difference between winning and losing that game, or winning and tying that game, was using Vargas over Atencio. But to get back to the earlier point, get back to Rusnak, I thought he was really good in the first half. He made a great pass to Ruidiaz right at the beginning of the game to set up a chance, I think in the 3rd minute. He also made a great play to track down the ball that ultimately led to Ruidiaz scoring his first goal. And he was, he was decisive with his passing. He played a lot, he was pretty good about playing the ball forward. He wasn't on the ball nearly as much as you would expect Nico to be on the ball, but that maybe isn't such a bad thing. The one area of weakness, though, was the left side, whether it was Chu or Morris, barely got involved in the game. And I think a lot of that is because the way the Sounders system is sort of set up is that Ladero is supposed to fade off into the left and essentially be like a false fullback, while Nuhu drops back and plays like a third center back. And Chu and Morris combined had 25 touches in the game. That's really not enough. Now, you score 3 goals. It's hard to nitpick any one player not getting enough touches, but it probably isn't the most sustainable way to score goals if you're just going to sort of abandon your entire left side of your attack. And I think part of that is probably that Rusnak only was training at the 10 for one day. I would imagine. I think Friday was probably the only day he trained there. So it's entirely possible that he just wasn't, he wasn't quite ready to fill that role. And he is a different player than Ladero anyway. And so I'm inclined to give him a pass. And if he ends up starting again against LAFC, presumably the Sounders will have had 10 days to sort of game plan for that a little bit more effectively.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's a fair criticism. I think that a lot of the Sounders' success earlier in the year was down the left, be it Jordan coming down the left or Chu feeding Jordan from the left. And so to have that whole side of the field cut off is kind of reminiscent of the bad old days of last year, because that was a consistent problem last season.
Yeah, it was.
So it is definitely something that would have to improve if Rusnak played there, because I don't think you can depend on 3 goals coming in every game. I mean, Charlotte is really bad defensively. I was encouraged. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that I think they're the worst defensive team in the league.
Yeah. I mean, I was definitely encouraged by some things we saw in this game, and a lot of those were just the decisiveness that the Sounders played with, and, the lack of timidity. And I thought that was something that's been missing, and I don't think you can chalk that up to Charlotte being bad defensively necessarily, but I think you can chalk a lot of the success the Sounders had in this game up to Charlotte being bad defensively. As good as the 3rd goal was, it was a great pass, great finish. I don't think that's a goal you're going to be able to score against a lot of teams in this league. I don't think that João Paulo is going to get the space to hit that ball, and I don't think Ruidiaz is going to get that wide open at the back post against better
also,
defensive teams.
To make it even more tough to reproduce, that was João Paulo's 3rd attempt at that cross. Essentially, like they had cleared it twice before that, and you give João Paulo 3 chances to hit that cross, he's going to hit it. Still, it was a nice finish. It was good instincts by Ruidiaz to get into that space. And, more broadly about Ruidiaz, he just looked so much more confident. He looked free. The way he hit his first goal was just absolutely vintage stuff from him. Funnily enough, it was a very similar goal to the one he scored against Charlotte last year. But this was a nicer goal. And he just looked like he was playing with a an attitude that was much more reminiscent of something that we've seen in years past that I don't think we've seen at all this year. Like even when he has scored this year, it's been, it felt like it was like grindy. It wasn't necessarily in the flow of the game. It was, like the goal against Portland, it was a fine goal, but he didn't really do anything else in that game. And this one, he was just everywhere. He was exactly the player that you need. And it was sort of a reminder that if they can get him fit for the rest of the year, that's probably better than they're not going to make a big signing, but getting him fit for the second half of the year would be the equivalent of making a big signing.
Yeah. I definitely had the observation that compared to how he's looked earlier in this season and how he kind of looked in the rough parts of last season before and during when he was hurt, he looked like a player now that had not tried to rush back from injury, that had actually gotten healthy.
Right. Yes.
And
that's a good way of putting it.
This is like, we've had this conversation with Nico before where it's really tough to tell sometimes whether this player has hit a decline and they aren't going to be able to stay healthy. And this player just hasn't had a chance to actually get healthy. And those can be kind of difficult to tell apart sometimes. But I do think that, and I think it's fair to say that we know Raul was not necessarily happy with how long he was held out. There was some definite rumblings of that. But
yes, absolutely.
If this is the player we get compared to the player we had the last time he came back from injury, it's hard to say that it was not the correct decision because he did look a lot freer. He was way more involved in the buildup. He was dropping deep. And that's not necessarily like a critical piece of his game, but I do think it's indicative of how much more fit, how much healthier, and how much into the flow of the game he is now than he was the last time he came back.
Yeah, there was an opportunity that third minute, I think, chance that he had. I noticed he was played in and he elected to shoot from, the edge of the penalty area or whatever it was. And it looked like he had Leo Chu sort of like coming in on the left wing, and Chu probably would have had a better look from where he was. And I, at the time, said, I don't mind him shooting that, in part because it's a mentality. Like, this is the mentality I want him in. I want him in the mentality of like, hey, if you play me through, I'm going to take the shot because I believe in myself to finish this chance more than I believe in myself to set up my teammate who might have a slightly better chance. And that's what you want from a striker. I think you want him to be a little bit selfish. You want him to take that shot. You want him to try to get his goals because that's sort of how he's going to build his confidence, is getting that goal. And I think we sort of saw that the way that he played. He played the whole game just with a confidence, and I was like really excited about getting Ruidiaz back. Essentially, even the finish that he had on the second goal, it would have been a shame if he missed it, but it was not so different than the one he missed the other day.
Yeah, no, definitely not. And it was the kind of goal that I think you have to have a certain level of confidence to score. Like right. That's as much as maybe it kind of looks like a tap in.
No,
it's more difficult than that to make the run, time the run, hit it on the run,
off a bounce.
Off a bounce. It's a great goal. It's the kind of goal that he makes look really easy, that, as we saw the last time he tried to score a goal like that, is maybe not quite as easy as it looks all the time. And I think that having, a certain level of confidence and just being back to feeling physically good and feeling back into the flow of the game really can make a difference.
Yeah. So one of the other big things I wanted to just get your take on, I saw you tweet about this, and so I wanted to bring it up. There was some chatter, like every time Stefan Frei gives up a goal right now, it seems like there's a chorus of people that want to declare that he's past it. And don't get me wrong, I think some of his stats are a little misleading in terms of overstating how good he's been this year. But in this game, I thought he actually played reasonably well, and none of those goals struck me as ones that I would ever expect him to save.
Yeah, I think that's I I truly do not know what people were seeing. And I know it's not necessarily fair to judge people's reactions like in the heat of the moment of a game, or, I saw a post on Reddit about how he needed to never start again. You should never you should never take anything people say on Reddit too seriously about the Sounders, especially. But I really I was expecting something, right? One howler, or, just not getting to a ball that he maybe should have. And I think what it is with Stephen Fry is that at his peak, between 7 and 3 years ago, 3 years ago, right? When he was an elite MLS goalkeeper, easily the best goalkeeper the Sounders had, year in, year out, one of the best keepers in the league, criminally underrated by the national media, but I think everybody that watched the Sounders regularly understood how good he was. He's not that player.
No.
And the decline has been noticeable from where he was at that point. I think he's still a better than average MLS goalkeeper. I
was going to say, I think there's this desire for him to be a top 5 goalkeeper. He's probably probably a top 10 goalkeeper, but he's not the elite goalkeeper. He's still, I still think he's going to win you more games than he's going to lose you. And I think you can absolutely win an MLS Cup with Stephen Fry at his current form, but he might not win MLS Cup for you the way he did in 2016.
I think that's very fair. I think that there is a time, probably not that long ago, where he gets a hand to Westwood's goal. I think
Maybe.
There are probably saves that he would have made in years past that he hasn't made this year, but he made saves that he had no business making on a routine basis for years. And I just think that people have gotten so spoiled by that version of Stephen Fry that they are really, really, really underrating the current version of Stephen Fry, which I think, as you said, I think top 10 is exactly right. I would put him in the top quartile-ish of goalkeepers in the league. He's not a problem for me at all. I think you definitely have to start thinking about a succession plan. He's clearly towards the end of his career, Father Time is undefeated and all that. But I think the idea that he needs to get benched so that, we can get a look at Cleveland. And I like Cleveland. I think he's a good keeper with a lot of potential, but I just don't see it. I especially didn't see it in this game. I did not think, I think he was the last guy to blame for every single one of Charlotte's goals.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think the other thing that just makes it tough is it's not like there is someone who is clearly up to his standard waiting in the wings. I think Cleveland is a fine backup. I don't necessarily think he's the Sounders goalkeeper of the future. Andrew Thomas might be the goalkeeper of the future. He's been getting most of the time at Defiance. He is an elite shot stopper. I'm not quite sure that he's as good in possession or in the other parts of the game that you sort of need him to be. And I'm definitely not quite ready to take that leap of faith either. And that just kind of,
I think too.
Go ahead.
Well, I think too that I think people really underestimate how important a keeper's ability to play to style is, especially when you're a team like the Sounders that wants to play out of the back, that needs their keeper to be confident in possession. And I think you could argue in a lot of cases that that's probably more important than being an elite shot stopper when you're a team that wants to play the way the Sounders do. And I think that just really gets overlooked.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's probably a good place to call this a segment. We're going to come back. We have a whole bunch of stuff to talk about. Jordan Morris, Cristian Roldan getting called up to the Gold Cup, some stuff about the Leagues Cup. And we're going to talk a little bit about our outlook for the second half of the season, and especially looking ahead to the LAFC game. But you're listening to Nos Audietes, and we will be right back. Watson's Counter wants to thank everyone for their patience, but now the wait is over. Located at 6420 24th Avenue Northwest in Ballard, they've reopened in a brand new location with the same bomb-ass coffee and the same dumbass vibes. You can still expect their classics like the gochujang fried chicken sandwich and Fruity Pebbles French toast, alongside their new soft serve program and their world-class coffee. Make sure to follow them on Instagram for all the latest and greatest. Welcome back to Nos Arietes. So, have a few more topics that we wanted to talk to that weren't directly connected to the game this week. The first one is a bit of a news item. Jordan Morris, Cristian Roldan, both called into the Gold Cup, which means they will potentially miss as many as 6 league games, which is just an absolute gut punch, especially considering Jordan missed the 2 previous games, came back, played 20 minutes against Charlotte, and Cristian was out for 2 months. I'm not surprised that Jordan got called up because he's clearly very much part of the national team plans. I was a little more surprised about Cristian, not just because I don't know where he falls in their grand scheme, but the guy has barely played in the last couple months.
Yeah, it's super frustrating. I think Cristian, like you said, is much more frustrating for me, both because the Sounders have weapons offensively. They do not have anybody that can do what Cristian does.
No, I agree.
And he came on against Portland. He was the only player that looked interested, the only player that looked like a spark in that whole game on either side.
Mm-hmm.
He comes back into the starting lineup, gets Charlotte, the Sounders, hey, they can attack again. And I don't think that's just Cristian, but I think it's a huge part of it. And I think that the way, the tempo that the Sounders need to play with, the way that they want to play, Cristian almost has to be on the field for that. And it sucks really bad. It sucks that they're losing him for so long because, and we'll get to the League's Cup, but because the league has decided that's more important than the regular season. And yeah, I mean, I'm never going to begrudge a player an international call-up.
Yeah.
But it's frustrating because it feels like this is an interim coach who doesn't really know what he's doing, who just wants to call guys in that feel comfortable, that everybody knows and that everybody can train with, so he doesn't really have to do too much. And I can understand that, but I don't care. It's none of my business. I don't care about the Gold Cup. I don't care about the U.S. men's national team, except kind of during the World Cup. And it's frustrating because it's going to have a very tangible impact on how I feel about the next 6 games.
Well, these next 6 games are potentially huge games for the Sounders. They are potentially season-defining games. Not the least of which, and this game against LAFC is maybe the biggest of the bunch, in part because LAFC comes into this game in an absolutely brutal stretch of games where the Sounders played on Saturday. They don't play again until a week from Wednesday. So they have essentially a 10-day gap between games. LAFC plays 2 games in between. And that will be the 14th game they've played in something like 7 weeks. This is a team who is absolutely ripe for taking if the Sounders can take advantage of it. And I would hope the Sounders can at least figure out a way to keep Cristian for that game. I have a feeling they won't because we've already heard that U.S. Soccer denied FC Cincinnati's request to keep Miyazaga and Brandon Vasquez. And so I don't know if they'll take a different tact with Morris or Roldan. I'm hopeful. I'm not necessarily expecting it. But, man, this is just it's a really, really bad stretch. And the Sounders, to some degree, made their own, this a problem of their own making. If they hadn't dropped so many points in their previous 10 games, I would maybe be less worried about these 6. But a
big part of the reason they dropped a lot of those points was because they didn't have Cristian. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so it just feels like punishment for the Sounders. I don't have the immediate solution, but I do think there's something to be said about the long-term solution to this, which is, look, if we're going to be playing League's Cup and we're going to take a break from the season to do it, I think you got to play it concurrently with the Gold Cup. And I realize that means that you're going to be missing some key players from both Liga MX and from MLS. But man, you can't devalue the regular season as badly as you are. I mean, essentially what MLS is saying right now is the League's Cup is more valuable than 6 regular season games, which is a lot. It's a lot of games.
Right. Which is also, they're saying it at the same time that US Soccer is saying or just, the way we think about international soccer and how much it's valued, this is much more important than the regular season as well.
Right.
This is a gold. I mean, they don't do the Euros every year. They don't do. Why are we playing the Gold Cup every year? We
play the Gold Cup every 2 years, but that's twice as often as they play the European Championships.
Right. It only needs to happen every 4 years.
Yeah, and
then we're gonna do the Leagues Cup every year. Just have the playoffs. Just do that. Just have the playoffs. Have everything, and just that's better than what we're doing now. Like, don't pretend like any of these games matter, because they really don't. Want as many teams make the playoffs as they do, and the playoffs are completely random at this point because of the new playoff format. It's just,
well, and I think
it sucks.
And I think my suspicion is that part of the reason they expanded the playoffs this year is sort of like an acknowledgement that teams are going to be handicapped by the Leagues Cup, and so they wanted to give they wanted to make it easier for some teams to potentially not be hurt by the league, by Leagues Cup having, whatever. You understand what I'm saying, I think. And that it does all sort of like build toward this idea that the regular season exists purely as a way of moving inventory and not as a way of creating a genuine competition. And that's super frustrating. And I think, and I hope that MLS will hear what I'm hearing all the time. I mean, I'm hearing from a lot of people. This is very obvious. And I think they are really risking the, a revolt of season ticket holders saying like, look, if you're going to tell me that, 20% of the season is just not worth playing, why am I paying for all these regular season games?
Yeah. Why am I paying for season tickets? Why am I getting a streaming service I didn't have before, and then paying for another streaming service for MLS on top of that? If these games are this unimportant, I'll just, whenever the team is on Fox, I'll watch them. And I think the Apple deal is fine outside of how you feel about Apple in general. But I think it's a reasonable thing to ask people to do if the games are important, if the games matter. If they don't, who cares? And if you're trying to convince people that we're sort of on the fence about being the kind of fan that will shell out for season tickets and MLS streaming, this isn't helping. And it's just, no one is more apathetic and at times outrightly hostile towards the MLS regular season than MLS ownership. And I don't get it. I don't get it. This is how you make your money.
Yeah, it's very weird.
Yeah, they treat the sport the same way the worst kinds of sports journalists treat sports writing, where they're concerned about stories and narratives instead of the games, because that's what the people that care about the games care about. The narratives are great when they occur, but all they're doing is trying to create narratives all the time. It's like WWE.
Right.
It's so frustrating because I just want to watch my team play meaningful games 34 times a year, and if they do well enough in those games, then I get to watch them play in the playoffs. But these games just don't feel meaningful.
Yeah, I mean, the regular season right now is so, and there are impacts the Leagues Cup is having beyond just these 6 games, because they're because of the Leagues Cup, they're also having to play more games in a tighter window. And so we have more 3-game weeks. We have more, there's all sorts of cascading effects. And what's frustrating is that it feels like it's such a challenge just with injuries to get any kind of consistency in terms of your team. And now we're creating sort of all these extra layers of complication, like playing through the Gold Cup, like having to compact the season for Leagues Cup, and doing all these sorts of things that just make it feel less competitive. And it's like, I'm gonna watch this stuff, I'll pay attention. I think maybe I'll be singing a different tune if the Sounders were to qualify for CONCACAF through Leagues Cup. Maybe I'll feel a little differently about Leagues Cup, but right now it just feels like it's cheapening the regular season, and at a time where I don't think MLS can really afford to do that.
Yeah. And there's been a conversation in like the very top level of club soccer in Europe about players are playing too many games. They've got European competitions, they've got multiple domestic cup competitions, they've got the regular season, they've got international duty, and these are players playing at clubs with much deeper rosters that are not having to play in every game. I mean, in MLS, you're expecting your best players to play every single game outside of maybe the US Open Cup. And it's just not sustainable. You're gonna run guys ragged. You're gonna have more injuries. You're gonna have shorter careers, unfortunately. And it's all in the pursuit of these competitions that just barely even anyone notices.
Right. Yeah.
It's very frustrating.
It is frustrating. More broadly, though, this is the Charlotte game actually technically kicked off the second half of the season for the Sounders, who I just thought it was worth looking at a few numbers that I went through. We oftentimes use FBref's numbers. I decided to go look at American Soccer Analysis XG numbers just because I was kind of curious how they compared. And one of the things that jumped out to me is the Sounders lead MLS with 31 expected points. And so I do think that's sort of worth remembering, and that's just sort of using a calculation based on their expected goals and expected goal difference to come up with how many points you'd expect them to get. And I do think that's somewhat relevant for level setting in terms of like how we assess the Sounders' first half of season. They're second in MLS with a 8.18 expected goal difference. They're third in MLS with 26.13 expected goals. They're fourth in expected goals against. And according to American Soccer Analysis data, they're actually closer to mid-table in terms of actual goal difference compared to expected goal difference. They're 11th in that category, which I actually thought was interesting because it felt like it more accurately reflected where they are in the standings. And anyway, I just thought it was interesting, and it gives me some hope that they can actually play or get better results in the second half of the season than they did in the first, assuming they aren't completely decimated by various availability concerns. So I don't know if you make anything of all that those numbers I just threw at you.
I mean, I definitely think they are worth considering. I think they're worth paying attention to. I do think that this is one of those situations where you make your own luck idiom is kind of true, where the Sounders were playing very well earlier in the year and probably scored more goals than they really should have. They've played poorly the last couple months, and they've probably have not gotten as many points as they should have from those games.
Yeah.
And I think where they are in the standings is actually a pretty reasonable based on how they've played overall. Which is
second in the West.
Yeah, second in the West. Certainly not like an elite team, but like if you look at FC Cincinnati, I saw the same ASA data you saw. FC Cincinnati is overachieving at a historic level. I mean, they are blowing all their expected numbers out of the water. I think they're a good team. I do not think they are the best team in MLS history, and that's the level that they're playing at right now in terms of the results they're getting. So it's not like the Sounders are the only team that are gonna regress. Unfortunately, FC Cincinnati's in the East, but and I think LAFC has been similarly sort of unlucky to the Sounders. I think they were both sort of at the same level of in the table of underperformance. So I also saw that the Galaxy have like been as much as Cincinnati has been overperforming. Yes. The Galaxy are underperforming, which is extremely funny to me because they really probably haven't been that bad, but they still got like everyone fired. It's very good. But yeah, I mean, I think you can't look at these numbers as concrete proof that the Sounders have been horribly unlucky and that they're, going to go back to being one of the best teams in the league. But I do think that they can sort of level set a little bit and say, this is a good team that had some good luck earlier in the year, has had some bad luck in the last few months, even though they haven't been great. If Raul is back to his best, if, like you said, Cristian leaving doesn't completely destroy the team, if Nico can get healthy and play the way he was earlier in the year, I feel pretty good about this team. They're not going to be the best Sounders team we've ever seen, which earlier in the year it looked like they might be. And so that's kind of a bummer, but I think everybody's kind of accepted that that was probably a little bit of an outlier in terms of the performances earlier on. I think this team could make a run. I think that they, I don't think I would consider them an MLS Cup favorite right now or anything close to it. But if they can show improvement, I think they could certainly make a run at it. And if you can go into the playoffs saying, yeah, we've got a shot at winning this, you generally got to feel pretty good about that. And I think they could definitely get there.
Yeah. And I'm also kind of, one other thing that gives me a little bit more confidence is I do think it's notable that Cristian's absence also coincided pretty closely with Obed Vargas also being out. And that's just another piece to the puzzle that can potentially help solve that absence. So, they may be better positioned to show some improvement than they were, during most of Cristian's first absence. So, we'll see. I did want to one other observation I just wanted to share, and it's not really particularly relevant, but I just thought it was funny. I went on to MLSsoccer.com today just to see if there were any other stories that were worth talking about. And what greeted me, but 4 centerpiece pieces about Leo Messi potentially signing in MLS. And this is almost a week after the news first dropped. Like,
yeah, I get it. But I also don't, because like, what is MLS getting clicks that are those people aren't coming back?
Right.
What does that do for them?
I don't know.
Are they bringing in a bunch of ad revenue from MLSsoccer.com? I can't imagine that they are. MLS has this mentality as a business entity of any attention is good attention, and it drives me completely batty. It drives me insane. It's why they put up with Zlatan. It's why they were retweeting The Rock after the Amelia thing. It's just, you can just be a soccer league that's regionally important, and that should be fine. That should be enough. It is for everyone else in the world, but MLS has to chase the attention, and I think it bites them in the ass a lot more than it's helpful. But I get that Messi's different, but
I just thought it was funny that it's like we're going, like, what are we going to do when he actually signs, let alone makes his debut?
You don't even want to know, man. It's going to be awful.
No, I think you're probably right. Yeah. But anyway, that's kind of what we got. I don't know. You have anything else you wanted to get off your chest there, Aaron?
I don't. I mean, I felt pretty good about this game, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't looking forward to 10 days off from him. I think that's going to be nice.
Yeah. It wouldn't be. I am also looking forward. I kind of neat that Father's Day weekend falls on an off week, which is that we don't get that very often. So with that said, we do have another mailbag episode coming up later in the week. If you missed it, earlier this week, we had Adam Bells from Scuff talking about Obed Vargas at the U20 World Cup, as well as for our paid Substack subscribers, we have an extended version of that discussion where we talk about Cristian and Jordan's place in the national team, and hopefully you guys enjoy that. But all that said, that's a plug. I guess you can consider that a plug to become a Substack subscriber. That is at nosadietis.substack.com. Those plans are $50 a year or $5 a month. And we're going to hopefully be having some more news sort of related to that relatively soon. But for now, thank you for being a subscriber. You guys make this possible. And it's been a lot of fun doing all these extra episodes. Also, thank you to Full Pull Wines and Watson's Counter for also playing a big role in making this happen. With all that said, I am Jeremiah Shan, signing off for Aaron Campo and Lickett. This is Nos Audietis, and remember, you will never be out alone.